Video 3, A Far Cry from Africa. Hi again. I hope you indeed took time to read the poem on your own. If not, do it now. A Far Cry from Africa was first published in 1962. This is the height of decolonization of Africa, a period when many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, south of the Saharan Desert, sometimes called Black Africa, received or had to fight for their independence from imperial powers like England. The poem addresses these events directly. The title, A Far Cry from Africa, can be understood as describing someone calling out or shedding tears in Africa. It's a far cry. It's a cry that comes out of Africa. There is something very immediate and present about the cry, a human voice you can't help but hearing. On the other hand, at the same time, it is a far cry. The poet here is distant from Africa. Indeed, a far cry is an expression that means very far away, very distant. The poem's title already gives us the doubleness of ambiguities. The speaker hearing a cry from Africa, or is he just really distant from it? Is he a far cry from Africa, or is he hearing a cry from Africa? I will begin reading the poem with you from the final lines, not from the beginning, because they raise a number of questions. In fact, they are phrased as a series of rhetorical questions. And of course, oftentimes, poems don't really give you answers, they ask the questions. I, who am poisoned with the blood of both, where shall I turn? Where can I go? Why doesn't he know where to go? Because he is divided in the vein, as it says earlier. What does is divided? Because he is divided in the vein. What does is divided in the vein mean? Vein are the tubes that lead your blood, our blood in the body. Is an internal part of us. He's saying that he is divided, conflicted to the core, to his very being. Is not only the core, but also the blood, perhaps alluding to the mixed genetic heritage that I talked about. His blood, his very blood is divided. He's the biological thing that connects us to our heritage is divided within him. As he said earlier, he's poisoned by the blood of both. He's from both lineages, European and African. I, who have cursed the drunken officer of British rule. I am on the side of the colonized. I cursed and was sorry about British rule because British colonialism, a drunken officer, an army officer or police officer, someone who is meant to be in control, have authority. However, he's not in control, he's drunk. Not really in control even of himself. Walcott here is very sarcastic about the British. It seems like that he not only dislikes their actions, but also thinks of them of worthy of ridicule. They are ridiculous. They are drunks, perhaps drunk on power. And this is part of who Walcott is, somebody who can see how the British are like a drunk officer. How do I choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love? So he disdains the British, he's for the decolonization, but he loves the English language. Notice that he uses the word tongue, not language. A part of the body. It is not just the language that he uses. It's not some kind of external instrument. It is a tongue that is attached to his body. He is also attached by this tongue to the British Empire. He's attached to it by the language that they gave him, the only language that he can write his poetry in. Betray them both or give back what they give? Do I own? Do I do I owe my origin something, or can I ignore and betray them? Maybe I can be free of them. How can I face such slaughter, such violence, and be cool? Can I see the violence in Africa and stay cool? Probably means in the sense of calm and nonchalant, not angry. Can I see this violence? Can I see this violence and not be angry? How can I feel committed to such a violent place? How can I stay connected to such a violent place? On the other hand, he can't disconnect himself from his origins, can't disconnect himself from British culture, and he can't disconnect himself from his African origin. On the other hand, how can I turn from Africa and live? Can I ignore my commitment to Africa, my place of origin, and keep on living? What kind of a life will I have if I ignore where I come from? Those are the questions that this poem is asking. So we see very explicitly the ambivalence of a hybrid post-colonial poet. He loves the English language but hates British colonialism. He feels committed to Africa, but he can't stand some of the violence there. Neither side of the conflict is right, but he cannot ignore the conflict. It's part of who he is. Earlier in the poem, we learn about the violence in Africa, specifically in Kenya. Both sides are extremely violent. It seems that even as he's committed to the end of colonialism, the speaker here finds the violence of decolonization abhorrent, insufferable. Let's read, but some historical background is needed. I learned this background from the footnotes in my textbook and by Googling the keywords. Nobody expects you to know everything. It's not part of your, doesn't have to be part of your general knowledge in order to understand poems from the other parts of the world. You don't have to know everything in order to understand poems from the other parts of the world, especially today with the internet where you can look up a lot of this information. And moving forward, I won't stop on every word and every line to make the video a little shorter, and also to tell you the truth, because not all of the lines are clear to me. And also not all of the references are crucial for you to understand. But let's go back to the opening of A Far Cry from Africa. The wind is ruffling the tawny pelt of Africa. He's setting the scene in the African savannah. Kikuyu, quick as flies. Kikuyu are a tribe from Kenya that enacted violence against European settlers as part of the struggle for independence in the 1950s. Notice that he's comparing them to flies, a lowly, annoying insect. So they do not come out as heroes or as positive actors here. They are more like flies, batten upon the bloodstreams of the veldt. Corpses are scattered through a paradise. There's a horrible contradiction here. Africa is paradise, an ideal place. The speaker may long for it, might seem fantastic, but here there are remains. But here there are remains of horrible violence, human corpses scattered after a battle or a massacre. Only the warm kernel of carrion cries, waste no compassion on these separate dead. Statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. The warm who enjoys digesting the corpses is happy. It represents those who put the violence aside as just something that is necessary, something that is justified, like statistic justified, as part of what the colonial policy. So violence is presented as a part of colonial policy that is justified by statistics or by scholars. What is that? What is that to a white child hacked in bed? But if you are a white child living in Africa who is hacked to pieces in bed by post-colonial violence, it does not matter to you if the scholars and the statistics and the politicians and the policymakers think that colonialism is justified. What does it matter to savages expendable as Jews? What does it matter to the savages who carry out these atrocities that some people think that statistically it's fine that some people die in this violence? Savages means someone who is willing to carry out atrocities. So in a sense, it might be a fitting term for the Kenyan rebels from Walcott's perspective. But it also invokes a word that was used to justify violence against Africans. From the European perspective, calling all African savages justifies looking at them as expendable, as killable, that it's fine if they die. Indeed, the British executed people associated with the uprising movement in the thousands. Walcott refers to the history of European genocide when he invokes how the Jews of Europe were treated as expendable during the Holocaust. Not just by the Nazis, who of course treated Jews as expendable, as worthy of death, but also by all the countries in the world that failed to help the Jews and take them in before and during the war. They treated Jews as not really worth keeping alive. He draws, and maybe some will say this is problematic, but I think it's okay to see connecting lines in how people are treated by countries. He draws a continuum between colonialism and the horrors of the Second World War. Threshed out by beaters, the long rushes break in a white dust of ibises whose cries have willed since civilization's dawn from the parched river of beast-teeming plain. The violence of beast on beast is read as natural law, but upright man seeks his divinity by inflicting pain. We understand animal violence as part of nature, is read as natural law, but there's an expectation that people who are upright, which means that they walk on two legs, but also means that they are law-abiding and civilized, that people will be better than these animals. This expectation is dashed when we look at human history of violence. In fact, the poet here is suggesting that people seek their superiority over animals by giving pain to one another. Like we may want to believe that what makes us human is that we are less violent than predatory beasts, but in fact, this is not the case, especially when you look at the news a lot and at history a lot. Delirious as this worried beast, his war dance to the tightened carcass of a drum, while he calls carriage still that native dread of the white peace contracted by the dead. Whiteness here is depicted as a kind of disease, perhaps playing on the plague of the Black Death. He depicts a white peace, a peace brought by white men, right? Like Kipling imagined the white man bringing peace, but he describes it as being contracted, like you contract a disease. Who is it that is ruined by the white peace, by the white disease? This is not really good peace, good quiet. It's the quiet and peace of being dead, right? We think of peace as a good thing, but also if you're dead, you're at peace. But it's not a good peace, it's a white peace. It's the fake bad peace that the whites brought to Africa, at least in this situation. The black dead are those suffering from the white peace. The colonialists may promise good things, but they bring death and violence. Again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkin of a dirty cause. Again, a waste of our compassion, as with Spain. The as with Spain, the gorilla wrestles with the Superman. Again, relating African history to the history of European savagery inside of Europe. In the 1930s, the Spanish Civil War raged and guerrilla rebels fought against fascist forces supported by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. In many ways, it was a testing ground for the techniques that were used later on by the Germans in the Second World War. The Superman here is probably a reference to Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of Übermensch that was used to justify fascism and Nazism. Walcott makes it clear that the savagery comes from Europe even more, or at least equally, as it comes from Africa. Africa is not inherently violent. It's just that the meeting with colonialism, with one kind of person trying to control another kind of person, leads to violence. Colonialism is a kind of fascism, I think is suggesting, and it's the root of violence. That is why he is in a dilemma, why he depicts both of his ancestries as poison, which is what we began with. We began this video with Europe and of Africa. Where shall I turn? Divided to the vain, I who have cursed the drunken officer of British rule, how choose between this Africa and the English language and the English tongue I love? Betray them both or give back what they give? How can I face such slaughter and be cool? How can I turn from Africa and live? Thus, we see how the violence of colonialism and post-colonialism turns the speaker here to think about his own mixed heritage, right? The poem started with the violence in Africa, but ended up with his questioning his own identity, his own hybrid identity. The final question seemed to have the answer, you can't. How can I face such slaughter and be cool? You can't. How can I turn from Africa and live? You can't. Ending the poem, not with a resolution to pick one side and saying, now I'm going to be African, now I'm going to be committed to Europe. No, but with an acknowledgement that you must live with this ambivalence. Okay. Thank you very much for listening to these videos. And I'm looking forward to seeing your learning assignments. Bye.